Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I'm revisiting an old favorite. I had so much fun last year rereading the Cosmere in preparation for the latest Starlight Archive book that it kind of ignited this urge in me to revisit a lot of my favorites that I've read years and years ago. And I thought we were better to start than with Lord Grimdark himself. So naturally, I went straight to the Blade itself, the very first of the First Law books. And yeah, I'll dive into my take on it now. So the book largely follows three main characters. The first of those is Jessel Danluta, who is this entitled aristocratic wastrel in the king's army. He's training to compete in the contest mainly because his father told him he has to, and not for any through any urge. The most emotion we see from him involves his story when his friend's sister comes to town. The other main character, my personal favorite, is none other than Inquisitor San Danglocke himself, who is he's placed on a slippery slope when his boss uses him to begin framing a powerful guild of merchants. And a slippery slope is a very terrible place for a cripple to be. And then the last major POV we have is Logan Ninefingers, who's your typical northern barbarian who answers the call of a mage to visit because why not? As to what goes on in this book, it's largely follow these three characters and events that happen when Baez, the first of the Meiji, returns to the Union after centuries. And when Baez shows up, things are about to change in great and terrible ways, essentially. So that's largely what's going on in this book. It's all set up, it's all character-driven stories, and that's like the heart and soul of what makes everyone love Joe Abercrombie so much. Like, it's been more than 10 years since the first time I read this book. Like, when I finally caught up with Joe Abercrombie, it was in time for the release of Last Argument of Kings. So it's been quite a while since I've read these, and it was such a joy just to dive back into this world and enjoy these characters all over again. It's been more than 10 years, and Glocta still remains one of my favorite characters of all time in fantasy. And it's all because of just Joe Abercrombie's signature mix of humor and cynicism and wit that just it really just propels this story and drives really makes it so compelling to read about these characters, not their internal monologue and the way that they view the world and the way that they go through things. Like it's just so engagingly done, incredibly engagingly done. And it's a testament to how good Joe Abercrombie is with characterization. Like, we have just this bitter ennui of Glocta, who is pretty much just doing things because why the hell not? Like, a constant question he asks himself is why is he doing what he's doing, and he cannot, he's incapable of discovering an answer to why he does the atrocious things that he does. He just does it, and he just does it to the best of his ability. He's at heart, he's just a bitter, cynical person, and I think one of the only joys that he has left in his life is on sharing the trauma and the terror and the abuse that he suffered at the hands of enemy torturers, of sharing that torment with the people who come into his power. So that's Glocta. Like, he's every bit as despicable as that songs, and every bit as fun to read as you would think. And then we have Luther, who honestly he's the standard fantasy wastrel. The only redeeming thing that he has going for him is that he has a pretty funny internal monologue. Like, he often finds himself in situations that can be misinterpreted or seem to shed a fairer light on him than he deserves. And then you get to his internal monologue, and you find he just has these streaks of he's just vain. He just has this superiority complex because of his aristocratic upbringing, and it's just funny, that juxtaposition, and it just shows well how great Joe is at writing these characters, because you have these two drastically different characters who have very humorous streaks to them, and it's done in completely different ways, but it's just as effective in both cases. And then you've got Logan, who he just goes along with whatever, whichever way the wind blows, but at the same time he has these stirrings of being exhausted by the life that he's led, exhausted by the constant war and fighting and terror that he's undergone, and he starts wanting for something more, and that's something that starts to build on him over the course of this book, and it starts to drive him to want to avoid the kind of life that he's led today. At the same time, it's very much a situation where he's incapable of imagining doing anything other than what he's done so far. So he just keeps going on. He just keeps going right back into these situations that he wants to escape. He really wants to escape. And as the three main characters, we have a whole host of supporting characters around them that are just as fun and interesting to read about. We have Bias first of the Meiji. We have Pharaoh. Pharaoh is a piece of work by herself. We have R.D. West, who honestly I completely forgot how amusing she was to read, with her own challenges and the way she deals with situations. We have and we have some smaller characters who pop in and out, who have very large parts of the to play in the story nevertheless. The main reason I spend so much time just going through these characters is because they're the heart and soul of the book. With the characterization, with the writing is what makes this book so good. Aside from that, there's a lot, but not as much as you would think going on. In terms of the plot, this book is largely introduction to these characters, set up and build up towards war, and that's largely the story that goes on here. Like the characters all go through very minor subplots. They're not particularly fascinating ones, but in all three cases they do serve a purpose to build towards something later on, as much as they're not necessarily compelling on their own. So because of that, like you'll often hear people say that, oh, nothing happens, which is ridiculous. Like, once a character does something happens by definition, right? It's not necessarily something you want to read, which is a whole other discussion. But anyway, in terms of the plot, not much. There's not a lot of complexity to it. Basically, it's the book. The whole point of the book is set up an introduction to the characters, and that's fine with me. I was here for this. And then we have the world building, which is a cynical, twisted version of Great Britain. It's not the first time I've read an author who takes that approach to that view of the empire. But this is one of the more humorous implementations of it that I've seen. Like, George just utterly strips everything, the entire veneer of majesty and greatness from the empire, and he puts his own twist on it. The very peak, the king himself is literally a completely non-functional idiot, like rolling in your own mess level kind of idiot. And that's the king. The filth starts right at the top and comes straight down. In actual control of the empire, we have the close council, which is a gathering of self-interested aristocratic members who they just have this deeply ingrained sense of superiority, not just for themselves, for their own citizens, and for the world as a whole. Like, they're incapable of contemplating that there's any reason why there should be anything that, like, anyone that's not an aristocrat, the peasantry basically. They're little more than anything that a resource to exploit. That's the only view in which they're seen. And then they have this superiority of the Kingdom of England, this sense of superiority of the King of England, when it's very clearly not the case. Like, as the characters travel to other kingdoms in other books, they do see that other cultures, obviously, they are just as advanced in their own ways. But if you're not from England, you're not good enough. You're not, like, England is the peak, and no one is as good as that, period. It's hilarious. It's hilarious because it is a very common thing to it's a very common sensibility, not just in this fictional world, but in our world in general. Like, anyway, that's a whole other discussion. And that's just England. Like, aside from the Union, I should say, Adour, the Union. Aside from that, we have England, which is like the Wild West frontier, now beginning to develop on the outskirts of England. We have other kingdoms who have a lot of bones to pick with Adour. Like, it's clear right from the get-go that things are brewing among these different geopolitical forces. And it's quite clear war is on the horizon, and it's going to be every man fend for themselves. So you can already tell that's the direction that this story is going in. And by the end, we do see, like, there's no argument that that's exactly the direction things head in. But yeah, that's pretty much what we're here for, right? And that's just the surface level. That's just the surface level conflict. We also have these layers to things that are going on, because Baez has his own agenda in returning to assist the Union in their time of flux. We have his own goals and his own desires, and we're left to question if they even align with what's going on with the Union. Baez is a relatively mysterious character in just the way that he approaches things and does things, so that adds some interest to it. Overall, a spectacular read. Like I said, this book in this series is very much a favorite for me. It's among some of the first fantasy that I ever read. It is one of the reasons why I love fantasy so much, and it is still very much in my top 5 series of all time if I had to list it right now. Does it hold up after so many years of having read so many things? Yes, it holds up, and no, it doesn't. I say yes because I still think it's better than a lot of fantasy being written today. No, it doesn't hold up, only because Joe has gotten so much better with some of his later stuff that this feels rough, and I can understand why people have trouble getting into it. But if you're an intensely character-driven reader, like, there's no way you can get into this book unless you don't like the characters. Which, honestly, given they're so despicable, it's a fair thing to say. But yeah, that's my take on the First Law, on the Blade itself, the first book of the First Law. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.